Title: 3 True Thunderstorm Horror Stories. Story 1, The Cabin in the Storm. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend. Mark and his friends had rented a remote cabin deep in the woods. No cell signal, no distractions, just nature. But they didn't account for the storm. As they settled in on the first night, the skies darkened faster than expected. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and soon, rain began to pour. "It's just a storm," Mark reassured everyone, though a knot of unease settled in his gut. By midnight, the storm had escalated. The wind howled, and the rain battered the windows like fists. Suddenly, the power went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. "Great," Emily muttered, lighting a candle. "Should we check the generator?" Jack suggested, his voice uncertain. Mark and Jack grabbed their flashlights and headed outside. As they neared the shed, lightning illuminated the woods, casting eerie shadows. They heard it then, a faint whisper carried on the wind. "Did you hear that?" Jack whispered, eyes wide. Mark nodded, his heart racing. They both looked around but saw no one. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the edge of the woods, barely visible in the rain. It was a man, standing completely still, staring at them. Before they could react, a deafening crash of thunder shook the ground, and the man was gone. "Let's go back inside," Mark said, his voice shaking. Back in the cabin, they told the others what they saw. "It's just the storm messing with your heads," Emily insisted, though she looked pale. But as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder. And then, the knocks on the windows started, soft at first, then more insistent. They were in the middle of nowhere, miles from the nearest town. Who could be knocking? Suddenly, the door flew open, and the cabin was filled with the smell of damp earth. A figure stepped inside, dripping wet, his eyes hollow, staring at each of them. "You shouldn't have come here," he whispered, before vanishing into thin air. The storm raged on, but now, they weren't sure if they would make it through the night. Story 2, The Haunted Road. It was a stormy night when Jenny and her friends were driving down an old country road. They were headed to a music festival, but the storm had delayed them. The rain was coming down in sheets, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. "Maybe we should pull over until the storm passes," Jenny suggested, but Tom, the driver, shook his head. "We'll be fine. We're almost there," he said, though his grip on the wheel was tight. Suddenly, the car's headlights flickered. "What was that?" Sarah, sitting in the back seat, asked nervously. "Probably just the rain," Tom muttered, but Jenny wasn't so sure. As they rounded a bend, a figure appeared in the middle of the road. Tom slammed on the brakes, but it was too late, they hit the figure head-on. The car screeched to a stop, and they all sat in stunned silence. "Oh my God, what just happened?" Jenny gasped, her heart pounding. We hit someone," Tom stammered. But when they stepped out of the car, there was no one there. No body, no blood, just the rain and the wind. "I swear I saw someone," Sarah whispered, trembling. The group stood there in shock, trying to make sense of it, when they heard a voice. "Help me." They turned and saw the figure standing by the side of the road, soaked to the bone, his eyes vacant. "You hit me," the figure said, his voice hollow. Tom backed up, his hands shaking. I'm sorry," he stammered, but the figure just smiled. "You're not sorry yet." Before they could react, the figure vanished, and the car's engine roared to life on its own. The headlights blazed as the car lurched forward, dragging Tom into the darkness. The others screamed and tried to run, but there was no escaping the storm or the spirit that haunted the road. Story 3, The Thunderstorm Ghost. Claire had always loved thunderstorms. The sound of rain against her window was soothing, and the flash of lightning was thrilling. But this storm was different. It started like any other, a gentle rumble in the distance, followed by the pitter-patter of raindrops. Claire sat by the window, watching the dark clouds roll in. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck, illuminating something in the yard. A figure, standing in the rain, just outside her house. Her heart skipped a beat. Who would be out there in this weather, she whispered to herself. Grabbing her phone, she dialed her friend. But before she could say a word, the power went out, and the call was cut short. Claire felt a chill crawl up her spine. She looked back at the window, the figure was gone. The storm raged on, but all she could think about was the person standing in the yard. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. She froze. No one should be out in this storm, she thought. The knocking continued, louder this time. Against her better judgment, Claire opened the door. There was no one there. Just the rain and the wind howling through the night. She stepped out onto the porch, her heart racing. But then she saw it, footprints in the mud, leading away from her house. Someone had been there, watching her. Claire backed into the house, locking the door behind her. But as she turned, her breath caught in her throat. Standing in the living room, drenched in rain, was the same figure she had seen outside. "You let me in," the figure whispered, its voice like the wind. Claire tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure moved closer, its eyes empty and cold. "You shouldn't have opened the door." And with that, the storm outside grew even fiercer, as if the very elements themselves were under the ghost's control. The thunder roared, and lightning lit up the room as the figure reached for Claire. The storm wasn't just outside, it was inside, too, and there was no escaping it. Moral of the story: in the face of nature's fury, not all storms are simply weather events. Sometimes, the forces of nature hide something far more sinister. Some storms bring with them more than just rain and wind, they bring the restless spirits of those who have never found peace. When the storm hits, beware of the unknown, for you never know what might be hiding in the shadows.